Hello, and welcome to Sobercast, where we provide AA speaker meetings and workshops in podcast format. We're an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us be self-supporting by visiting Sobercast.com, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 into our virtual basket. We hope you enjoy the podcast. Have a great day.
On behalf of the Saturday Night Live at Pine Lake Speaker Meeting, please help me welcome tonight's speaker, Rebecca H. from Seattle.
I'm Rebecca, I'm an alcoholic. I say Seattle loosely. I did all my using in Seattle, but I live in Auburn now, and I was raised over here in the East Side. So they asked me, where you're from, and so I just put a blanket statement of Seattle. But anyway, it's an honor to be here tonight. I'm a little nervous. At my home group in Los Angeles, where I got sober, when you say you're nervous, the audience goes, "Aw." Thank you. No, I'm a little bit nervous, but being up here in this deal, it's not about me. It's not about me at all. And I'm going to do my best to take me out of the equation. I'm just up here telling my experience, strength, and hope, and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and how I found a loving God, in these rooms. And Pixie, I want to thank you so much for asking me to share. What an honor and a surprise, but a great honor. Thank you. And then it's also neat to be able to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous with my family. We're all drunks. My dad, who has 37 years of sobriety, and his loving partner who has 37 years as well. She has 3 months on my dad, or 6 months on my dad, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't let him forget that. So, but it's really neat to be able to sit in a meeting with my dad, and every time that I speak, my dad is in the front row, every single time. And, my dad is my best friend today, and that is definitely a gift that Alcoholics Anonymous gave me. I also have a little brother in here who has about 1 year and 4 months or 5 months sober, which is an absolute miracle as well. And, I have a little brother I have a boy, my boy, who's down in the child care, which hopefully we're not saving a seat for him. But, if we are, I hope that Alcoholics Anonymous is alive and well for him too. But, he's down in the child care facility. And I'm so grateful that there are meetings out there that have that available, and when they're not, I take my son to meetings with me. We sit in the back and we try and be as respectful as we can. He's 7 years old, and it can be a little bit difficult sometimes. He's an active boy, and, but AA has embraced us. They have embraced us and they have welcomed us. And I can't tell you what that means to me, especially my home group. My home group is the Empire Way. We meet every Wednesday night, and it is the best home group in the world. And if you don't think that about your home group, get another home group. Empire Way is my home group. That is my home. And when we show up there, people love my boy, and they take him outside and they throw the ball with him with the dog, and they, they love him, and again, I can't tell you what it's like to be a single mother and to have AA surround me and my family, because I need to be a mom. I need to be a mom, but I definitely need to show up here too. And AA is my number one priority. It has to be for a drunk like me. I can't just do this thing halfway, half measures avail us nothing, that the book talks about, and I've tried half measures, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I've tried half measures, and half measures availed me nothing, and so, so I bring my boy to meetings with me. And anyway, I'm just here to share my experience, strength, and hope in a general way. I don't have a canned pitch. I didn't practice in front of the bathroom mirror today to I have no idea what's going to come out of my mouth. I did pray. I remembered to pray, and I do have, my experience, my strength, and my hope, what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today, what it's like now, and I'll do my best to be able to share that with you guys. And again, like I said, it's a great honor to be able to do that. I was born in Houston, Texas, and those of you that have heard my dad speak, hear his great talks about Texas and where he comes from, and he has great pride in where he comes from, and so do I. I claim Texas any chance I can. I only lived there for 2 weeks, but I still claim it. just because my dad loves it so much, like it just sounds so cool. But I was born in Houston, Texas, and my parents met at a bar called the Brass Monkey, and I think that's so fitting that that's where I come from, And they had an alcoholic marriage, and I'm not here to tell my dad or my mom's story, but that's just a little bit of the facts. They had an alcoholic marriage, and it ended in divorce when I was 3. My mother had inherited a large sum of money and took me and my 3 brothers to move up to Seattle. And in 1979 or 1980, I'm not quite sure which year, I was pretty young, we moved up to Seattle. And this is where I was raised. And, by the time I was 8, my mom had gone through all that money. And my parents had joint custody. My dad had then joined AA and had moved up to Seattle as well to be with us. And like I said, my parents had joint custody, and we would, spend some time with my mom, spend some time with my dad. And my mom went through that money, by the time I was 8, and she just kind of walked away. She had enough. She couldn't deal with being a mom. And my dad raised me from then on out, me and my 3 brothers. And I have done inventory. And I know that my mom did the best job that she could with the tools that she was given, but as an 8-year-old little girl, I didn't understand that. And I grew up feeling very different and very alone, and so I just always remember feeling that. I was completely self-obsessed way before I took my first drink, and that's a sign of alcoholism, is that complete self-obsession, and I also remember, my dad, who was in AA and who was raising me, was my hero. He was my hero, and he was in AA, and he got me involved in church activities and 4-H and some positive things in my life as a little girl, and I remember thinking, I didn't want to drink. And I remember my dad putting me in alcohol and drug classes when I was a young girl and educating me about alcoholism. And I remember going to Alateen, and I made a conscious decision that I was not going to drink. And then, I hit junior high. And things get a little awkward when you hit junior high, and I started hanging out with a group of kids that I thought were cool, and they wore the AC/DC Metallica shirts, and, they had all the boys hanging out with them, and I just, I don't know, I was attracted to that. And so I started kind of hanging out with them, and they drank, and they smoked pot, and I remember telling myself I wasn't going to drink and I wasn't going to smoke pot, and I would watch them do this until this cute boy, I think his name was Jason Schoonover. It's so funny, I remember his name. We were all hanging out in an abandoned bathroom in Juanita Beach, and they were passing around this crushed Coke can with, funny little green stuff on it, and it got to me, and I just took it, And then I went to my friend's house after smoking that stuff, and I stole some schnapps of some sort. I can't remember, peach schnapps or something gross like that. And I remember drinking it, and then I remember going home, and I remember, and it's so cliche. You hear so many speakers talk about this, but it's like I could breathe for the first time. Like I no longer cared about what you thought about me. I didn't care. It's not that I got pretty. It's not that I got smart. I just didn't care. And I remember laughing, like really laughing. And I'll never forget that feeling. I knew, I loved the effect produced by alcohol. I absolutely fell in love with it. But I also remember the next morning, I promised myself I was never going to drink again. And that's my drinking career right there, at 12 years old or 13 years old, however old I was at that time, drinking because it was my solution. It helped me deal with life. And then promising myself, I'm just not going to drink like that anymore, and not being able to stop. And that was that young of an age. And I didn't drink for about 6 months, and then I picked it up again. And at that point I drank every chance I could. And at 13, I wasn't a daily drinker, obviously, but I believe I had lost the power of choice whether I could drink or not at that young of an age. I really do. By the time I was 14, I got kicked out of school for drinking vodka in the bathroom stall, and I was running away from home, and my dad, not really knowing what to do with me, put me in my first treatment center. And that was the age of 14. And I got sober at 35. So there's a lot of years in between there. When I got out of my first treatment center, like I said, we lived in the East Side area. I found a place called Hilltop Fellowship Hall. And I know there's some people here who got sober there, and that's awesome. some people I've known here for over 2 decades, from that place. And some of them have been able to stay sober, and some of them have not been able to stay sober. I don't think it was Hilltop. It's just, I don't know. I wasn't able to stay sober because I found Hilltop, and it was more like a kind of a hangout for young people, and I wasn't willing to follow any kind of direction on how to stay sober. I just wanted to kind of hang out in AA and date different people, and go to all the different conventions and all the different dances. Anyone remember the 449 Club? Yeah. So, we used to do that kind of stuff. And it was fun and it was exciting, and I was hanging out with people that were my own age. But like I said, I have a disease of alcoholism, and I'm unable to stay sober on the unity side of the triangle alone. I'm unable to stay sober by going to Alcoholics Anonymous alone. Now, there are people that can do that. More power to you. I'm just not one of them. And what would happen to me is in my teen years, I spent in and out of AA. I would get about a year sober, and life would happen, right? And I don't have the tools to be able to deal with life sober, that I would get thirsty and I would need a drink, and I know what takes that pain away. And I would drink, and then things would get so bad while drinking that I'd have to get sober. And like I said, I did that cycle my whole teen life. And by the time I was 18, I went to my second treatment center at Thunderbird Treatment Center in Renton. And I was there for 3 months, and I got out of there, and I went right back to Hilltop, and I met a guy, and he tattooed my name on his shoulder, and I thought we were in love. And actually, I had my first son, Elliot, when I was 20 years old. And I had every intention of being a good mother to this little boy. Every intention. People were trying to talk to me into giving him for adoption. People were trying to talk some sense into me and some reason. And I was like, no, I can do this. I can be a good mom. And if I had stayed sober, maybe I would have. And if I had worked the program, maybe I would have. But I didn't work a program. And again, I convinced myself that maybe I was crazy. Maybe just this time I need some relief. I can control it. And I went and I got a bottle of wine, and I drank that bottle of wine, and that phenomenon of craving occurs, and I am off and running again. And my son's dad was a heroin addict. And I don't blame him for this at all. It was my curiosity that got me started on heroin. But I was curious, and I wanted to know, what that deal was about. And I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And in 8 days of that relapse, I had committed my first felony. I had lost my son. I'd gotten kicked out of where I was living. My dad had taken the car back, and obviously I wasn't going to college anymore. And that's in 8 days. Tell me there's no progression to this disease. And I was off and running again. And this time I found myself as a 20-year-old girl, almost 21-year-old girl in the streets of downtown Seattle. And I have absolutely no hustle. I'm raised on the east side. I have no idea, you know what I mean? And I find myself in shooting galleries in Capitol Hill. My dad had to take me out of one, and I was 106 pounds when he came and found me to take me home to detox me on his couch, just holding on to me with tears in his eyes, going, man, what the hell happened? And, cause I tried to kick heroin with speed, and, that didn't work too well. But then I went to so I stayed out there for a couple of months, and, just kind of danced around a little bit. And then like I said, I had lost my son, Elliot. And I went to my third treatment center, Cedronar. I don't know if anyone is familiar with Cedronar, but that's a behavior modification work therapy program. And it's long term. And I completed that. I was there for a year. And the only reason why I stayed there for a year is because my son was CPS involved, and they gave him back to me when I had 6 months, when I had been there for about 6 months. And I had my boy with me, and I couldn't leave with him because he was still a ward of the state. And so I completed that program, and I got out, and things were going well. I was young. I was at the right place at the right time. I landed a job at Boeing. I had my son back with me. I had my own apartment. Everything on the outside looked good. And I thought, this will fix me. This was my solution. I just needed everything on the outside to be okay, and then I'll be okay. And it didn't work out that way with me. I still had the disease of alcoholism, and I was dying inside. And once again, I turned to alcohol, and then alcohol, I turned to the heroin and the cocaine. And they, the state came and found out I was using again and took my son. And I had fought to try and get him back. And they put him in an adoptive foster care home. And I fought to try and get him back, and I couldn't stay sober. And then I had a reality check. And I looked at that little boy who was then at 3, and I realized that I could never give him what this family could give him. There was a mother, there was a dad, he had a brother, he had a dog, he had a house, they had careers, they had money, they had everything that I didn't have. And I walked away. I walked away from that little boy. And he's now 20 years old, and I haven't seen him since he was 3. And I hit the streets, and I hit the streets really hard. And I'm not talking like a couch commitment every once in a while on a friend's, house. I'm talking about in the alleys, underneath the bridges. And I lived like that for years. And I got used to living like that. And I never thought that I would live like that. I remember being on the streets as a young woman and just slowly, keep crossing the line. I'll say, I'll never do that. I'll never be like that person. And I kept crossing the line. And I kept crossing the line. And then I found myself, looking at my nails one day, and they were dirty, and I just remember, people would walk by me on the street, and they would look at me with complete disgust, or they would look at me with they just wouldn't pay any attention to me. And I just remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this is not who I am. This is not who I am. And I cannot stop. I cannot stop using. And like I said, I lived like that for years, the jails and the institutions and the insanity, of shooting galleries and crack houses and, just the insanity, detox facilities and not being able to stop. There were years my father didn't know where I was. He would get updates from me from the local police officers who would call him and say, we had a sighting of Rebecca. She's still alive. And that's how my dad would know I'm alive. I thought I had tried Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought that AA had failed. That this deal didn't work for me, that I was constitutionally incapable of being honest with myself, and that I was too crazy for this deal. And so I couldn't come back, and what happened was, I'd been out there for a while, and I had gotten a little bit more time sober and trying to do the dance with AA, and what happened was, I caught a couple cases, and I ended up in drug court again. It was my 3rd time in drug court. And this time I had 3 felony drug cases, and they put me on the methadone maintenance program. And I thought, that's my solution, the methadone maintenance program. And then I met my second son, my son who's downstairs. I met his dad playing sober softball, and I had Michael shortly after. And Michael was born addicted to methadone. And I'll tell you, I'm going to say this right now, and I say this every time I speak. Anytime I talk about kids and this disease, it is not pretty. It is not pretty. And I hate standing up here and admitting what kind of mom I am when I use, because my son is my number one thing in my life today, along with AA. He is everything to me. And I love that little boy with everything inside of me, but yeah, you put alcohol in my system and I am not that, all that goes out the window, and I am just living to drink and living to use. And that is just the kind of person that I am. I am completely powerless over this deal, and so I had my son, and and what makes me sad is that when my son was born into this world, there was no one there to greet him. There was no one there. My dad had sent flowers, but they had a really hard time with me being on methadone, and it must have been heartbreaking, knowing that a child was coming into the world like that. But there was no one there to greet him, to love him. I had pushed everyone outside of my life because of this disease, and it's not like that today. I'll tell you, my son has so much love around him, a lot of it here in these rooms, but so I was in drug court, and I was, trying to do the deal in drug court, and I was on methadone. And then I think I stayed away from the drugs and stuff for about 3 years, drinking. And then I convinced myself that I was on methadone, so maybe I could drink normally since I'm on methadone. I really thought that. And I went out and I got a couple beers, and at the time I was working at Starbucks. I'd been working there for about 3 years. I got a couple, cause I made that decision. I cannot wait. I can't wait till after work. I went on my break and I bought like a 6-pack of Heineken. Heineken's harmless, right? And so I don't have any way to open this beer, and I'm not cool where I can open it with my mouth or anything like that. So I crack it open and I get caught, right? My new boss catches me. Well, she didn't catch me drinking, but she caught some green, from the bottle, and she confronted me, and I threw something at her, and I called her, a name, and obviously I got fired, but this is like my grandiosity after just 2 beers, And so I get fired and I'm drinking again. It's the same story. I'm drinking again. And then, I tell myself I'm not going to do any hard drugs. I'm just going to drink. And then I remember one Christmas, actually, I had forgotten it was Christmas. I didn't even call my family. And I remember them coming over, and the look on their face, they just wanted to make sure that I wasn't in the bathroom dead with my son hovering over me. What an awful thing for parents to have to think about, on Christmas. And that's how they spent their Christmas that year, and I was drinking. And pretty soon I started using the drugs again, and I lost everything again, and I lost the apartment, and I lost everything. And I had a friend of mine who flew me down to Los Angeles, where my mother lives, and the plan was I was going to stay down there for a couple of months, and I was going to pick up the pieces, and I was going to move back up to Seattle. And I had every intention of getting sober again, and I went down to Los Angeles, and I remember getting on the plane. I drank and I used until I got on the plane. The stewardess came around. I had $20 in my pocket, and the stewardess came around, asked me if I wanted anything to drink, and I said no. And I thought, I'm doing good, right? And so I get off the plane. I go into 7-Eleven to buy a pack of cigarettes, and there's the alcohol right there, and I have no mental defense against that first drink, and I start drinking again. And I'm down in Los Angeles in an area that I am unfamiliar with, and I'm drinking in MacArthur Park, and I'm leaving my son with my mom while I'm out running and gunning all night long. And a couple of weeks that went by, and I had a moment of clarity one night, and that moment of clarity, and again, I hate mentioning this stuff, about what kind of mom I am when I'm using. But that moment of clarity came when I had that little boy with me, and I had been smoking crack all night long, and I had been drinking, and I was with a stranger, and we got into an altercation over money. I wasn't giving him my last $40. And there was this big altercation in the middle of the night, and this woman came, and she came to my defense, and she helped me get my stuff out of this car, and this big drama scene. And I went over, when it was all over and done with, I went over to go thank her. And she looked at me and she told me exactly what kind of mom she thought I was. And she said, she laid into me. And my ego didn't want to hear it. My ego got puffed up and got back in her face. But you know what I did? I heard it. And I had a moment of clarity. And the very next day I went into Alcoholics Anonymous. And I just had that moment of clarity, man, where the alcohol just wasn't working anymore. It wasn't quieting the voices anymore. It wasn't my solution anymore. And I crawled in here. I crawled in here, and I got sober in a place. I was in LA, like I said, and I walked into this group, and people knew I was new. I think my mom and I had like this huge argument, like out front or something. I don't know. And it was just this nasty scene, and I'm walking in and I'm thin and, just, how we look when we're new. And, but no one looked at me in distaste. They came up to me and they sat me and they brought me right over to a woman. Her name was Dasha. I'll never forget. And Dasha had me sit next to her in that whole meeting. And she connected me with other women that were sober mothers. And I got numbers that night. And she got a directory. And she circled the meetings that everyone went to on the regular nights. Just said, if you go to these meetings, we will all be at these meetings. And I was just willing and desperate enough to follow some direction. And I called the next day, and my first direction was to not go buy cigarettes in a liquor store by myself. I couldn't. The alcohol was still talking to me. But I got sucked up in this deal. I got sucked up into it. I can't remember what the speaker said that night. There's a lot of speaker meetings where I got sober. I can't remember what he said that night, but I just remember the love, and I remember people surrounding me, and I heard the music, But there was still that voice inside of me that said, "You're too crazy for this deal. Your problems are too complex. You've tried AA." And what I realized after really doing AA is that I never did AA at all. That I just hung out on the fringes. I came in here trying to look hip, slick, and cool, trying to save my face, trying to hook up with him, and I never really got down to the nitty-gritty. I came in here as a taker. I never got in here and tried to help set up chairs or help clean a bathroom after a meeting. Never once even occurred to me. When I was a teenager, my dad used to give me $2 to every meeting. I thought he was paying me to go to meetings. I didn't realize that was for the basket. I think Brent pointed that out to me one night, actually. And, I was a taker in Alcoholics Anonymous. I would come in here hip, slick, and cool, looking at my phone, They didn't have phones back then, but if they did, I'd be the one texting, look at me, I got all these, That's what I'll tell you what, if you pull out a phone in my home group, they will snatch that out of your hand. And I don't mean that to sound, I just mean that people taught me to show some respect in when people are trying to get sober. And people taught me how to sit and listen, to sit and listen. And that I didn't know anything. All those prior years of being in AA and all those prior years of being sober, I had to push all that aside and be a newcomer. And I was desperate. I was desperate as a dying could be. And I was also still on methadone. And I thought I was sober. And if you're on methadone and you're here tonight, man, welcome. I'm just here telling my story. But I knew that I had to get off that drug. It's synthetic heroin, for those of you that don't know. And even though it was doctor prescribed, I had to get off that drug because I wanted what you had so desperately. I wanted what you had. Like, I was sold from that first meeting. And I started, I stopped claiming sober time. And I started getting real with people. And I said, I'm on this drug. I'm on methadone. And they said, okay, cool. And then I would just kind of, start with negative, I'm at negative 40 days of sobriety, instead of, and people just loved me. They're like, how many milligrams are you at today? I'm like, oh, I'm at, 80 or whatever, and what happened was I went down a milligram a day. It was 100 milligrams and I stood in that methadone line for 4 years. And I went down a milligram a day. And when I got down to 40 milligrams, I went into detox facility and I went into the detox facility for 10 days and it wasn't easy. And the day that I got out, my sponsor and my sobriety sister picked me up. And that's my sobriety date, which is July 25th, 2011. And I cherish that day. I cherish that day. And I remember, I wanted a real sobriety date. And I'd worked so hard to get off the methadone. And I was sick. You guys, I was sick. I had severe withdrawal. But I'd come to the meetings and I felt better. I literally felt better. And I remember, when I had 2 days of sobriety, I couldn't sleep. And I was pulling my hair out, man. And I was like banging my head up against the wall and screaming in pillows. And I called my sponsor at 3:00 in the morning and I said, hey, someone had given me some sleeping medication. And I said, can I please take the sleeping medication? I just need some sleep, man. I cannot sleep. I'm going crazy. And she said, you can take it. Now, mind you, this isn't doctor prescribed. She said, you can take it, but you're going to have to change your date. And those 2 days meant so much to me. It meant so much to me to have a real date. I toughed it out. And it wasn't easy. And when I got sober, I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a car. I wasn't living with my mom because she's Section 8 at that time. She went through all of her money. And she was Section 8 and I couldn't stay with her, so I lived in a homeless shelter. And I had nothing. And that's just where my disease took me. That's where my disease took me. It stripped me. You don't have to have a story like that to be in here and to be in AA. It doesn't really matter actually what your outsides look like. It matters like how alcohol affects you, but that's just what my story looked like. I had absolutely nothing. But my sponsor directed me to go to a meeting every single day. Every single day. She didn't care that I was a single mom. She was a single mom herself, actually. She'd come down off of methadone herself, too. She'd been a heroin addict. She'd lost her daughter. I couldn't pull anything over on her, and she told me, I want you to go to a meeting every single day. And you know what? People then come and pick me up at meetings too. It cracks me up how sometimes newcomers are like, can you pick me up? And they're 2 blocks away from the meeting, Like I lived, and I'm more than willing to do that. I am more than willing to pick up anybody and take them to a meeting. But my sponsor directed me to go, to take the bus to a meeting, to show some willingness. And for a drunk like me, I needed to, because in my 20s when I was in AA, everything was given to me and that didn't work. It didn't work it works for some people. It didn't work for me. And so I needed to put some effort in this deal. And so I did. I took a bus to every meeting and she got me home every night. She or one of my sobriety sisters or another woman in AA got me home that night. And I lived in pretty nasty living conditions for my first 9 months of sobriety. But again, like I said, every time I came to AA, you guys wouldn't let me feel sorry for myself, and I felt better and I felt the magic and I felt the love. And I came in here just with my head low, and you guys lifted it up. You guys saw something in me. I remember there was this woman named Marianne Kay who's got 40 plus something years sobriety down in LA. And I remember the first time she came up to me, she remembered my name. And I can't remember what that felt. I cannot forget what that felt like with her remembering my name. It had been such a long time since someone had been so happy to see me. A respectable woman, had been happy to see me and remembered my name. And I tell her that, every chance I can, of what an impact that made for me, and slowly life started coming back into my world. I had, it was simple stuff. It was simple stuff like take esteemable action and you will get self-esteem. Okay. That makes sense. So I would take the bus to the meeting and I had a sense of pride of that I was getting there on my own, that I wasn't working anybody over. When I had about 9 months of sobriety, like I said, I moved out of the living conditions I was in, and I moved into the Midnight Mission, which is in downtown LA, is the main office, and the apartments that they have for the single families are in Inglewood. And I lived there for 20 months. And that place was great, that place was amazing. I got to work there at a little restaurant, and while I was working there, I was able to go back to school. I was able to save some money, and my son and I had a large 1-bedroom apartment, that was, transitional housing, and we were able to, kind of work. I was able to work my way back into society a little bit, and I stayed at that restaurant job for 3 years. And then I was able to go back to school, like I said, and I became a surgical technician. And I had a 4.0 GPA, and I believe the reason why I was able to go to school and I was able to hold down a job and I was able to practice these principles is because I learned how to practice these principles in AA, by honoring my commitments, by showing up early, like I said, by not being a taker, and by giving back to AA and showing some respect. And it started showing up in the outside world. And so I became a surgical technician and I did really well scholastically. And then it was time for me to do my internship. And for those of you that don't know what a surgical technician is, it's basically the surgeon's right-hand man during surgery. And so, I have to retract and I have to hand instruments and I set up the OR and I do all that kind of stuff. And it was really exciting, but I got this doctor that, wasn't very nice. He wasn't very nice at all. And he barked at me. And I just remember, I didn't show it then in the OR, but he told me to step back and, let someone else, take over for me. And when the case was over, I went to the bathroom and I just started crying, and I just remember just thinking, you're a junkie. You're never going to amount to anything. You're a loser. Why are you even here? The operating room? Are you kidding me from where you come from? This is just loud going over and over and over. And then the next thought came. And the next thought was, you may be a loser. You may not be good at what you're doing, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to give it every chance I can, and I'm going to scrub in with this guy every chance I can. And I learned that in AA. I learned that, for those of you that don't know Clancy, I'm not afraid of anyone after meeting that guy. I was at that guy's yard for 4 years, and lots of other old timers, who just taught me to suck it up, who taught me not to be run by my emotions anymore, and I did. I scrubbed in with that surgeon every chance I could. Every time he turned around, I was gowning and gloving him. And I earned that man's respect. And everyone hated the surgeon. Everyone hated. He was tough. He was tough. And he pulled me aside one day and he said, Rebecca, it's not that I'm a jerk. He said, it's just that I just told this lady earlier today that she's got breast cancer. She's going to die. And we had a heart-to-heart conversation. And he started teaching me things and he started taking me under his wing because he knew he was intimidating. He knew that I was showing up and I was just having the heart to be there. And when I left my internship, he wrote a letter of recommendation for me. And on that letter of recommendation, it says that I'm the only surgical technician that he's ever done this for. And that's AA. That is AA. See, you can come here and you can just show up and be a taker. But I guarantee things like that probably will not happen in your life. Maybe they will, I don't know. But I know that happened in my life because I showed up in AA. When I went to my home group in LA is 800 people. We meet every Wednesday. And they dress nice and they look nice. And I tell you, I came in with no dress. I had a suitcase, I had a kid, I had $20 in my pocket. That's it. And I look at these people and I would think, oh my God, if you knew what kind of alcoholic I was, you would not accept me. You would not love me. My head was so loud. And thank God I had sponsorship direction that told me to go work the room. And I was terrified. I mean, scared to death. And she told me she would make me. I would sit down, she would snatch me up and make me work the room. And I'd work the room and I'd meet a couple people, and eventually, like I said, that meeting, that 800 people meeting became my family. I'd show up at yard, we do these things called moves, where we'd go to people's houses and we'd help them move, and, we'd just do all these wonderful things as a group, and it healed something in me. And I was able to show up and scrub in with that surgeon and get that letter of recommendation, which I tell you helped me find a job, believe me. And so I am now a surgical technician. I was in Seattle, I was in Los Angeles for 4 years, and about a year and a half ago, I made the decision that I want to move back home. One, because it's, my son's dad lives up here, and I wanted my son to be raised with his dad. And the other is because, I have lifetime amends up here. I have my father and Debbie are up here. My family's up here, and it just felt right in my gut to move back to Seattle. And I did it the right way. I talked to old timers and I followed direction, and it took me 6 months to move from LA to here. And I didn't know what the job situation was going to be like. I had a couple odd end jobs working at plastic surgery joints in LA. And I didn't know, again, because you have to do this Washington State licensing thing, health licensing thing. And I've got priors, and I have a drug felony possession, and I didn't know what that was going to look like. And I was scared. Again, I didn't want to do it. I thought, they're not going to give me any, I'm not going to find a job. There's no way. And my sponsor said, it's not up to you. Just take the footwork, do the action, and leave the rest to God. And that's very simple action. I can do that. Okay. And so I started taking the footwork. I had to go to the courthouse and get all the documents and this and that. And then I turned them in, and they gave me my license. They said it had been 5 years since your last conviction, and there's nothing violent on your record, so we're going to give you this license. And I thought, okay, great. So I start looking for work, and I land a couple job interviews. One was with Group Health, one was with Swedish. And I interviewed for Group Health, and Group Health, it was a panel interview, and there were several people that were interviewing for this particular job. And they called me, it was a holiday weekend last July, and they called me and they said, hey, we just want to let you know you're our top candidate. You're on. We're excited. Welcome. And I was like, right on. And then HR called me. And HR said, this is unfortunate. I just got done talking to our lawyers, and we're looking at your record, and you're just too risky. We cannot hire you. And my heart sunk. Because I thought, oh my God, I remember, telling my dad, and I remember thinking I let my dad down, and I remember just, feeling just like, oh my, like what's going to happen next? How am I going to survive? What am I going to do? This obviously isn't my field. And then again, because of trained feet in AA, I remember, you take care of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous will take care of you. And I knew that if I just put AA first, if I just do the next indicated thing, that whatever will happen will happen. And you know how I know that? I know that from the old timers that are here doing this deal today. That go through the ups and downs in life. We're not promised a pretty life. We're promised sobriety, and we're promised to never go through anything alone. We're not promised our families back. We're not promised a great relationship. We're not promised fame and fortune and money. We're just promised sobriety, and comfort where we're at in sobriety. We can live comfortably in sobriety, and so I thought, okay, well, I'll just do the next indicated thing. And I started going to meetings, and I started talking about it and kind of making jokes of it. And then, like I said, Swedish had gotten a hold of me, and then I did a second interview with them, and then I dealt with HR, and a third interview with them, and then they wanted me, and I told her the same thing. I disclosed myself to HR. I was like, look, this is on my record, but I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I will jump through any hoop that you want me to if you want to hire me, if you still want to go through with this. And she said, hey, you're on. You're in. And now I've been there for next month, it'll be a year, but I am a surgical technician working in labor and delivery, helping bring new life into this world on a daily basis. And I'll tell you, and I'm good at what I do, let me tell you. I'm good at what I do. I never saw that on that detox bed. I never saw that. I never saw that. I would have never guessed that for me. I would have been happy with a Section 8 house and a carton of smokes. You know? Maybe some guy from the mission, you know? Those were my great, goals in life. That's the only place I saw me. God has so much more for us, if we really do this deal. And then another thing, when I mentioned my dad, and the relationship my dad and I have today, in the years of drug and alcohol abuse and in and out and getting close and then relapsing and, being a mother and knowing how much I love my son, I can't imagine what that must be like. And I know there's a lot of parents that deal with that in here. I remember having a conversation with Debbie actually, when we were talking about the 9th step stuff and I tried to do kind of a dry amends to my dad. I didn't really know, what to do, what the next indication was. And we sat down and we talked about it. And, I will never be able to make it right. I will never be able to make it right. I will never be able to give, that relationship back with Elliot that was lost. I will never be able to get all those years that were lost, of having to worry about a daughter on those streets. But I can show up today, and I show up the best way I can, not because I have to, but because I love my dad. Because my dad's easy to love. And those of you that know my dad know that he's easy to love. And I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky to be able to share this deal with him. I go and I show and I bring him up coffee, not because I have to or because I'm a great person, because believe me, I'm not. But because I love seeing my dad. I love the pride he gets when he introduces me to 20 people. Walking down the aisle. Hey, have you met my daughter? Man, that is priceless. That is priceless. The relationship that we share today. Unreal and a complete gift. When I hit 1 year of sobriety and my home group does this great tradition where, when a person turns 1 and they're actually in the middle doing this deal, we go down to Norm's on their 364th day and we watch them from 10 o'clock to midnight turn 1 to make sure that they don't drink. That they get their 1 year anniversary. And I had a watch and there was probably 150 people there at Norm's. And I asked my dad to show up. I really wanted my dad to come and see what kind of program I was working. I wanted him to know that I was finally in good hands, and he was reluctant at first, and he should have been, because he had seen me turn 1, I don't know how many times. Several. He's given me a coin, we've been there, done that. And he came, he made the decision to come, and we sat there at that watch table, and they asked my dad to speak down there at one of the Pacific Group meetings, and so my dad spoke on a Monday, and my dad, who's amazing, gave just this great talk, and people just adored him and loved him for good reason. And then on Tuesday, I turned 1 and we went to the watch table and we were surrounded by 150 people. And what my dad didn't know is that everyone's sponsor directed to be there. They weren't there for me. I mean, they were, but we all show up for each other. And Debbie was on the phone too, at midnight, and everyone sung happy birthday, and watched me turn 1. And then when I took my cake at the Wednesday night meeting, I got to do 10 minutes that night. And something healed with my dad and I that night, that when I turned 1, something healed with us. And he came down when I lived down in Los Angeles, and he flew down every time I took a cake, and my dad's spoken down at Pacific Group, meetings, and they love him down there. It's like a second home group for him down there. And what a gift that AA has given our family, And then again, watching my little brother, and the life that we have together, as we were close as kids, and it's priceless. And I want to tell one more story. I know everyone's trying to get antsy and everyone wants to get out of here, but I just want to tell one more story. When I was down in Los Angeles and I was living in the Midnight Mission, I had never been a runner before. Never been a runner in my life. And they put on a 5K little deal, it's like 3.1 miles. And I thought, okay, sure, I'll do it, and I trained for this 5K and I'm running on my little, treadmill and then I do the 5K and I finished the 5K and I had this grandiose idea. I want to run a marathon. That's just how I think. I'm either a 4.0 student or I'm in the street shooting dope, I'm like marathon runner or I'm, couch potato extraordinaire. And so, it's just how I think. And so I'm like, I want to run this marathon. And I start training for the marathon. And people are like, yeah, okay, Rebecca. And that may just fuel me more, right? And so I start training for this marathon, and I ran my first marathon in LA in March 2 years ago. And the first thing I did when I crossed that finish line was call my dad and tell him that I did it. And then I caught the bug, and I decided to run the Seattle Marathon. And when I ran down to the Seattle Marathon, Dick Billings was there, and my dad was there. My little boy was there, my son's dad, and my brother, who was still working on a story and reeking like it, was there. He calls me the next morning, the drunk call, oh, you're so inspiring. It's awesome. Anyway, I met my dad and Dick Billings at mile 5, and I thought, oh, cool. It was 26 degrees, too. And I was fine. My face was numb, but I was fine because I was moving. These guys were hanging out. Mile 5, they saw me, took a quick picture. I kept running. I was like, okay, cool. They came and saw me. That's awesome. Then I saw them at mile 9, mile 18, and the finish line. It was awesome. And I tell you, when I ran that marathon, I ran by streets I used to work. I ran by that King County jail. I ran by bridges. I ran by houses where friends have died, and I watched them die. I ran by horrific memories in that marathon, and there wasn't a dry eye the whole time. And I finished, and it was unbelievable. And then I had an opportunity to go to Rome, Italy, and run a marathon over there with the Midnight Mission, all paid for. It was unbelievable. I ran a marathon in Rome, Italy. And then I got back and we moved here and I ran Seattle again. And then this last March I ran Barcelona, Spain. And it's not about running marathons. It's about, I never pictured this stuff on the detox bed. I never knew life could be this good. I don't know what your story is, what yours is going to look like, but I believe in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's too much evidence for me not to. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Sobercast is ad-free, and we'd like your help in order to keep it that way. So if you'd like to help us be self-supporting by pledging $1 or $2 a month, visit Sobercast.com and look for the donate links. Thank you very much.